Subconscious Influences on Decision Making, Aaron Ketty, EDP 310, Understanding the Brain, today's date 5/03/25. So presentation goals. I want to first discuss my interest in this topic and then the description of this topic. I also want to talk about the most important information and statistics I found. I also want to discuss why this is impactful for the world, why it impacts me, the importance of subconscious decision making, and of course my references. So my interest, I was curious to learn about how our values and even our mood affect every aspect of our decision making. I also wanted to see how this changes if you take account different life experiences, and I was also curious to see how internal and external stimuli influence these decisions. So first of all, what are subconscious influences on decision making? Well, these influences are factors that play into decision making that we do not actively make ourselves. These influences include biases, habits, past experiences, and deeply ingrained emotions or beliefs. So consider your values. These unconscious habits are created to better help us memorize and process new information. And examples of this includes first impressions of others, what route you drive to work, what shoes you choose to wear every day. So these connections often are due to different types of biases, known as confirmation bias, attribution bias, and affinity bias. So if you look at confirmation bias, it is based on confirming pre-existing beliefs without seeking information, which essentially means if I have made an assumption about another individual, I'm sticking to that assumption. I am not looking to find any information to contradict what I think. I'm just trying to confirm what I already quote unquote know. So attribution bias. Individuals allow themselves more forgiveness than others, and they make assumptions about the actions of others that often lead to misinterpretations. So a great example of this one would be if somebody came in and they told me that they've been doing this specific treatment plan and I don't agree with it, right? And I don't think it's a medically sound choice, or whatever the situation is, that I'm going to currently have this superiority over it, right? And then I'm going to think they're wrong, and I'm going to make all these other conclusions and not listen to what they're saying, right? And then that is very similar to affinity bias, where you're favoring individuals with similarities, where they have gender, race, interest, like same interests or same backgrounds, right? So essentially for this, like a great example would be if you had somebody come in and they spoke English a lot better, you're probably going to try a lot more in that conversation to make sure they're getting, let's say, the care they need in comparison to somebody who you have a hard time communicating with. You might get frustrated and not give them equal care. So what does research say about this? So intuition plays a larger part of decision-making and conscious reasoning due to the limbic system. So the amygdala, I don't know, and hippocampus in our brains store our memories and our emotions. And so these places tie in with bias and the decisions we make because we're making them mostly on emotions and past experiences rather than actual evidence. So that ties in with confirmation bias, attribution bias, and affinity bias. Essentially, it's just all of these unconscious decisions you make based off of your beliefs. And if you go into more detail about that, why is it so prevalent? Well, in daily decisions, it is estimated that the average adult makes 35,000 decisions each day, many of which are unconscious. So, you choosing to move your hand when you talk, you making any decisions like that, those are considered unconscious decisions that you don't often think about. Which is why a large part of our daily actions are, of course, not necessarily chosen. So our brains process approximately 11 million bits of information per second, and yet we are only consciously aware of about 40 bits. So obviously that is a lot more going on than we are aware of, and that level of unconscious decision making is very pertinent into our core of humans, of what we value and we believe. So the overall impact of these unconscious biases is that the pervasiveness of prejudice affects 90 to 95% of people, which essentially is entirely adults. So essentially every adult out there has some level of bias or predispositioned thought processes on things. And it's always hard to challenge and change our mind. So how this affects the world, these subconscious influences on decision making play a large role in our habits, beliefs, and intuition. And why does it matter though? It directly affects policies. It directly affects marketing and advertising campaigns you'll see. Think about how they cater to you, and or they'll ask you, which would you rather see? Conflict resolution, especially in the workplace. It entirely dictates how you will approach this and how you want to deal with the situation. And our everyday routine, all those habits and stuff. That entirely plays into that as well. So how this affects my specific field of interest? Well, I am graduating with a health science degree, but I am going back to school for radiology technician. So when I do that, I need to truly remain unbiased and professional at all times, because if I make assumptions about individuals, they will not receive proper care. If I fall into confirmation bias, it could lead me to not asking the right questions. Attribution bias could lead me to be judgmental and misinterpret information based off of others' beliefs. Affinity bias could cause me to be careless about my interactions with individuals I do not relate to, which just results in worse quality treatment, which obviously is not equitable at all, which means you need to be able to address your certain level of biases and just, put them aside and just give the best care possible. And why is this important for other people? Well, if we don't understand our emotions, experiences, and values, we don't understand how these conscious and unconscious things will likely fall under types of bias and prejudice. I think it's especially important to be aware of our actions at work to ensure a fair environment and ensure there's an ability for conflict resolution. If we don't challenge these pre-existing beliefs, we tend to lose our curiosity. And without curiosity, we are more likely to become increasingly biased in favoritism towards a certain value. And of course, this would be my reference page 1 with the first 4, and this is reference page 2 with the last 3.